Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show here in Tucson. What a absolutely beautiful way to start the day. I was a little bit uneasy coming down here just in my own bed of neuroses, but I got a chance today to settle in with a gifted melodic improviser and a beautiful cat. Don Latarski, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you for having me.
I couldn't ask a better person. You were in your teenage years, like in the late 60s, or getting into early adulthood, late 60s and early 70s, around 20 years old. And I wanted to ask you, were there any jazz curriculums at all at that time? And if so, did you learn the language of jazz through the oral tradition?
I had no idea that there was any kind of school for jazz back then. The way I got into it originally was through a guitar teacher that I had through a little music studio, which is north of Detroit, in a little place called Utica. And it was called Tempo Music. And I hope that...
What was the cat's name?
Well, I was just going to say, I want to say his name. That was not his real name, because a lot of people in the entertainment industry back then switched their names from some ethnic, difficult spelling and impossible to say names.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so this guy went by the name of Steve Jerry, and I've tried to find him, but I don't know where.
Steve Jerry.
Steve Jerry.
Okay, so
come on, Steve.
Steve, if you're out there, man. Wait, so he was in Utica, Michigan.
He was in Utica, and he was playing jazz guitar. This is 1963. So he's playing a Gretsch Country Gentleman guitar, which he really wanted to be playing the Gibson L5 like Wes Montgomery. But anyway, this cat he was good. He was a really nice guy. Really wasn't that much older than me. He's probably like 6 years older than me or something like that. But he was working like crazy. He was teaching like 40 students and gigging every night. So he was just completely wrung out. Really nice guy, though. I hope that he sees this and gets in touch with me. I would love to be in touch with him.
Were you an autodidact? I mean, here's the point. You heard stuff on the radio. You couldn't rewind. You had to hear it once, and then you had to extrapolate off of it on your own. So, I mean, can you talk about how you learned the language of melodic invention?
Well, yeah, I didn't actually learn it that much when I was that young. I left Eugene. I quit taking sort of jazz lessons about, 1966, 67, maybe, 67, because I was wanting to get more into the rock and roll side of things, and Steve was definitely not into that.
He was sort of a bebop guitarist?
Yeah, that, and just, he would sing and accompany himself. He had like a straight kind of gig at the Holiday Inn kind of thing at night or whatever, something like that.
Right.
Where he was, had to be more of an entertainer. I wasn't old enough I never did see him, I don't know. But that's what he would tell me, the kind of things he would do. I think he was doing a solo gig where he'd accompany himself. He could play chord melody stuff pretty well. He taught me how to do that. In fact, I won a trophy one year, and then I won a ribbon the next year.
A ribbon.
I think I won a ribbon the first year and a trophy the second year because he taught me how to play stuff that sounded like this.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't actually the song that I played for that, but the song that I played, I can't remember all of it. I was, this one? Quiet Nights and Quiet Stars. That's the song I won a trophy playing when I was 13. And that's because of him.
But of course, you were coming along with the burgeoning rock scene. I mean,
yeah,
well, that was like 66. So you already, would you say that that Mr. Jerry, if he's out there, God, I hope he's out there. But do you think that helped you really improvise, like learn to improvise?
You know, I wasn't actually soloing over those changes.
Okay, I was going to say, you're doing it now, but not then.
Yeah, right. I was just playing it. So what happened, so I left his tutelage, like I say, after about 4 years, because we were just kind of going different ways. I wanted to, you know, rock and roll. And what happened after that is that I stayed in Michigan until '73, moved out to the West Coast then. And when I got to Eugene, there were cats that were playing circles around me, and it was driving me crazy.
Oh, I cannot. For the audience out there, by the way, Don Latarski, people are like, who is this cat? I'm like, Don Latarski, just for the record, the audience, this is the cat right here. What was the scene like out there? I interviewed a guy who had the first French restaurant out there, Chez Ray Soul. Who recently passed away.
That's right.
Yeah. La Prima, I can't remember the name of the restaurant. La Primavera.
Yeah.
First organic vegetables, all you know, and the Karamazov, Flying Karamazov brothers were in there, and Carlos Santana, all the cats. What was the scene like? Explain the scene and who was out there playing circles around.
It was pretty. It was a thriving jazz scene.
Really?
It was. Yeah.
Holy.
Okay. Well. Let's see if I can remember. I can't remember all the players, but did you ever hear of a guy named Sonny King?
That name doesn't ring a bell.
I believe he was an alto player.
Sonny King.
Sonny King. He passed away quite a few years ago. You got to check him out.
Oh,
he was sort of the ringleader of this. Like he and his wife, who is still alive, living in Portland, fabulous jazz singer Nancy King.
Oh, I got to find her.
Yeah. Anyway, they were kind of like getting a lot of young people together and making sort of an environment, almost like a school, but informal, that people could come in and sit in with them, and they would basically teach. And so, gosh, there were probably at least, I mean, it's not a very big place, but there must have been, I would say, at least 15 to 20 people actively involved in trying to learn how to play jazz. And
I'm just going to ask you straight up,
yeah.
You know, because you came from that school, isn't that the most effective way to learn? Jazz, to me, is a street language, and you know, and I wanted you to talk about how you. I mean, do you feel like you developed your own individual sound because of that street learning?
In part, yeah. Now, I just left University of Oregon, which they have a really nice. Really great jazz program.
Are you the head of the guitar? You're the guitar teacher there?
Yeah, I was head of the guitar studies department there.
You were or you are?
I'm no longer. I'm now a free agent. I left. Some people would say retired, but I don't call it that. But
if someone comes calling, you would entertain the offer.
I still teach on the side.
Sure.
I don't want to quit that because I put so much into it, and I've learned so much from doing it. But you know, there are jazz schools that you can go to, and they are excellent. The only problem that I ever see with a jazz school is that jazz is an individual language. And when you're in the jazz school, you have to kind of jump through all the hoops that the jazz department requires of you to do. And people definitely persevere through that and still come out as individuals. There's no question about that. My path was different than that in that I just figured it out, you know, and I'm still figuring it out.
You didn't have to jump through the hoops, though. Sonny King was not somebody who was going to run a curriculum through Latarski.
No.
So how did you explain? Give an example of a lesson,
Well, an environment. It's okay. Here's how it worked: is you go and it's like a jam session, and so you know people know the jam session tunes. You know. Blue Bossa and...
How Insensitive.
Yeah, I mean, these kinds of things. That was actually a more complex tune than what people usually call at jams, because there's a lot of harmony there. But, you know, tunes that don't have so much, you know, harmony in them. But I mean, you know, All the Things You Are's got a lot of harmony, and that's kind of a tune that gets called a lot too. So there's a lot of tunes like that, you know, that you could come up with. And some of them were certainly way beyond what I could handle. And so what I would do is I would take the tunes and sort of break them down into small pieces and go like, okay, you have to have something to do. You got to know how to play over 2-5-1 progressions, or just 2-5s that cycle, you know, back cycle and whatever. And so you play that. You can loop that. I had a tape recorder. This is way before digital. And so I would just record that little snippet of, not the whole song, just a piece of it. And then basically, and here's been my secret all these years, is if you can sing something over a set of changes, let's say, it's going to give you a pretty good result. In other words, it's going to be a melodic figure, because you're not going to be singing, you know, Charlie Parker lines over that kind of thing. And so basically,
I dig, man.
Yeah, so
it's the singing component of it as well.
It's very important. It's very important. So I tend to, when I play, I tend to try to create more melodic statements rather than technical, you know, things that I practice and I'm going to plug in. And see, a lot of jazz education is like that. Okay, you get the book and here's, you know, 24 Charlie Parker things that he did. Learn those and learn them in every key. And when you get to those harmonic environment situations, plug those in. That's not a bad place to start, don't get me wrong, because eventually you're probably going to come up with your own variations on those. But there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of cats transcribe. I mean, that's a big part of jazz education. And
you can't transcribe an Elvin Jones solo and it's going to come out the same, you know?
No, it's never going to come out the exact same way. It can't, because
the feel, though. I'm talking about the feel.
Yeah, the feel, you can't really get that. That person has that. That's their thing. It's
like you said, it's an individual, jazz is an individual sound.
And there's a lot of guys, I mean, you can hear them play, you know, 6 notes and you know exactly who it is because of their what I call like their time signature or their time identity. It's
time feel.
Yeah, it's like the way they play things and where they put things.
I love it.
I mean, it's like if you buy a book on Wes Montgomery's transcriptions, and they exist, and you play that stuff, it doesn't sound like Wes Montgomery. It doesn't sound like him at all. But that's note for note what he played. But you see, there's so much more to it than that.
Of course, Joe Sample said that when he went to Wes's house, Wes didn't know the chords he was playing. He didn't even know. He was just playing.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he was a savant.
He said, how did you, yeah, exactly. That's what he was. He was also a cement mate. You know, he worked at a cement factory, had 8 kids, and was just...
Yeah, he was a welder, is what I heard, or something.
For Professor Latarski, did you make it a point, or how did you get your students not to sound like you?
Well, first of all, I didn't write down anything for them to say, like, here, play this line. You know, here's a line that I'm going to play over it, but you're not going to play that because you can't. I mean, not from a technical point of view.
I did.
But it's mine. Uh-huh. And no matter how much you transcribe it, it's not going to sound like you. It's not going to sound like me either. But, you know, these are good things to start with. You know, if you don't have any ideas on what to do, you got to start somewhere. I mean, if you're passionate about wanting to sound jazzy, what all of this comes down to, which we haven't used this term yet, but it's all composition. It's all about composing in the moment. That's really what it comes down to, and that's what has always driven me. And I've written a lot of tunes for this reason. It's like, well, okay, if I want to figure this stuff out, maybe I should just start writing my own tunes. Even if they're, like this last thing that I just played for you only has 3 or 4 chords in it, the thing I started playing. But, you know, you can take one chord or one sound and you can imagine it's a ball or a sphere. You can keep turning it around in different, and so that people hear it differently.
Oh, yeah. Now, Latarski is cooking right. By the way, people are, the Infinite Jones, could you play an original tune? People are calling.
I did just play, I started out with one.
You did? That was because people, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll play a little something.
Play something else, yeah.
I'm going to keep it kind of on the slower side.
Yeah.
I love this stool, by the way.
Yeah, dude, people are
that? I mean, it's.
This is what we can afford. This is what we can afford at Power Talk.
It's got office patina on it. All over it. I hope that doesn't come off on my pants.
Welcome to Power Talk. Better than an armchair.
Let's see if this is going to cooperate, because it's like I said earlier.
The humidity, yeah.
The humidity has made my guitar neck go a little bit wonky. not part of the song. I'm just kind of getting warmed up here, but it's all related. That's called On Winter and Holding.
When you got out to Eugene, did you wind up falling in with a group that you went on tour? Did you go on tour?
No, I didn't go on tour. I went and planted trees.
Very Oregon-esque. So you, I mean,
it's true. I didn't have any money, so I had to do something, you know, and that's what some people did back then, which sounds more romantic than it actually is.
I think it's really hard labor.
It was really hard, and you're living out in the woods in the winter, and it's raining,
so
not snowing.
But you had to get stuff out of your system. So could you talk about? You said it was we never really kind of finished that. The vibrancy. Was there actually an Oregon regional sound? Do you think? Detroit certainly did.
I don't know about that. I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe in Portland there were this, you know, Seattle or something. There might have been people who know more than I would have something to say about that.
Right.
Like Larry Coryell.
Larry was up in Seattle. I mean, So where were the clubs to play at in Eugene?
Okay, in Eugene we had 3 or 4 at least. The big one was in what was called the Eugene Hotel. It was the King Cole Rooms. It was like a concert environment there. And big name people came through there. I mean, holy cow. The first time I saw Pat Metheny was there in 76. I believe it was 76. And, oh my gosh, who else did I see in there though? I think I saw Chick Corea in there. It was a pretty cool place. But there were some clubs, some, pretty thriving club scene. Jazz had an audience then, which in Eugene now, not much. There's one place.
What is the place there now?
It's called the Jazz Station.
Yeah,
and it's actually a volunteer-run place. So but when you go, it's small. But when you go there, it's a concert. I mean, it's not people. The glasses aren't blinking, which is really cool.
I mean, were you? I guess part of my issue today is just the idea that, at least when I hear modern melodic music, there's a homogenization of sound. I can't tell who's who,
Oh, really?
I mean, when you were able to put on a record before, you could just tell right off the bat if it's Pete LaRocca or Mickey Roker or Clyde Stubblefield, or you could tell the drummers right off the bat. You could tell the horn players right off the bat. So I guess more to the point, I ask you, talk to younger cats out there who are just indigenous musicians, street scholars, so to speak. What's the best way to go about developing your own individual voice?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I would say that you just have to play a lot and listen and try to bring in lots of different influences that turn you on. Obviously, you're not going to study something that you don't like, I hope.
Of course, that's what a lot of schools, you have to do some of that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, I think you get a style. And the funny thing about that is that you never know when it's actually happened, I don't think. Right? It's like, when did I have a style? I mean, part of my style, I realized, came from when I stopped playing with a pick. Then all of a sudden, I had a steady gig, by the way, in Eugene with my trio, which is Mark Schneider on bass and Jason Palmer on drums. And we played every Friday, Saturday night.
At the Jazz Station?
At a place called, no, not at the Jazz, it was a bar restaurant called the Oregon Electric Station, which they don't have live music anymore.
Right.
But we did it for 13 years. And it's during that period that I actually was able to develop what I feel is my style. Because I was writing a lot of music because I knew that on Friday night I could bring it to the band and we could play it.
And it was totally, the audience was totally accepting of it as well.
Well,
and you stopped playing with a pick at that time.
We thought the audience would be okay, but mostly they were watching TV. That's the bar life, right? Turn the TV up. Buy more. That's why we got fired. They needed to buy more TVs. So, why should we pay the band? That's
well, and that's the other part of it, man.
That's the downside of club work.
Well, and then on top of that, the advent of just the idea of saying, well, why pay for a quintet when we can just hire a DJ to spin records?
Exactly.
So I guess that's so through what I'm hearing is playing in different environments, playing different styles that you get off on, and then ultimately composition. You will find your voice through composition.
Composition's a big part of it. I think people should write music. That's what kind of the whole thing for me is about writing music. Really, I don't play as much as I used to. I mean, I don't want to travel and I don't want to tour. I want to be outside in nature, frankly.
I mean, we're so blessed to have you here in the old Pueblo. But did you get a chance to meet Ken Kesey?
Oh, definitely.
Can you talk about your relationship with Ken?
I didn't really have a relationship with Ken. I was more of just kind of in the shadows. We chatted. We talked about music. He asked me to play some music with him.
In what context, though?
Well, it's all crazy stuff. Everything is pretty spontaneous. Did you talk to Ken Babbs?
I've interviewed Babbs about 8 times.
Well, okay.
Babbs is a sick trombone player.
I played with Babs. I think there's something on the internet. If
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding.
You played with Babs?
Yeah.
At Tsunami Books or where?
No, at his 4th of July party.
Oh boy.
And yeah,
was George Walker there? With the
saxophone?
saxophone?
Who knows, man? Just don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Those are my brothers. I mean, so how did you? I mean, when did they first come on your radar? Obviously,
a long time ago. Back in the 70s.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, how did your paths cross in Eugene at that point?
Just probably being in the art community, with Shay Ray, and
rest in peace.
Well, and art. You see, here's part of the deal was this. It might have been through Mason, because I connected with Mason a long time ago, and and he was part of that circle.
How did you connect with Mason Williams?
He contacted me about playing on some demos and stuff with him, and then I started actually playing in the. What band did he call it? Well, his Christmas shows, which were extremely extravagant. I didn't play in his bluegrass stuff, that Of Time and Rivers Flowing. I saw you did something on that. I didn't play in that because I don't have that kind of vocabulary, the bluegrass thing. I do sit in with some bluegrass players, and they find what I do amusing, but it's not actually in the style of that. I play... kind of.
Yeah, I would find it amusing too. I feel like you have more of a soaring sort of like more roll than rock kind of feel to you.
Well, it's fun to play it, and I enjoy sitting in with these people and doing this. I really do. But I don't have that phrasing. My phrasing is blues and jazz. I'm always laying back on the beat. I don't know if you noticed that, but.
Yeah, behind the beat a little bit.
Yeah, behind the beat, and also, this is that whole thing that I alluded to earlier about what is your time. What is your phrasing? And so that's where my phrasing is when I play with the band, the same deal. It's like the drummer has his phrasing and the bass player has his, and then I interface with that, but you want to be in between all that so that what you do sticks out. So if everybody's playing exactly the same beat thing, well, then it's computer music, right?
That's absolutely. It's all playing to a click or
yeah.
That's the other thing. There are cats now drummers that I've interviewed, studio cats. They will hear some drums going on in a different room, and they say that's got to be a machine. And they walk in and it's a human being playing machine parts.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason I do my show. I mean, you were asking me before how I found you, but I'm dedicated to authenticity. I'm dedicated to the guts of music. There's gallons of inauthentic music being made and being crunched into the ears of cats like my daughters. And
oh yeah,
if you can't detect that authenticity, then that's the collapse of civilization right there. Did the natural sounds of being out in the woods, planting trees, being in nature, have an impact on your time feel?
Oh, yes, especially on the last this. Most recent recording.
Talk about it?
The river recording, absolutely. Yeah, that one is like I'm transcribing it right now. I spent quite a few hours yesterday because it's an improvised record for the most part. Not the whole record, but there's 9 pieces that make up this thing called the River Suite. But I wrote it as one piece. I wrote it as a 31-minute composition. And that's the way I think of it. In fact, that's the way I'm going to perform it. So I'm transcribing it now, and I will perform it either with a trio or a duo or with my laptop helping me out in certain places. But here's the point of that business.
Yeah.
And that is, the reason why I called it River is because being in Oregon, I get to spend a lot of time on outings that involve water, of course. And a lot of that has to do with streams and creeks and rivers and lakes. And I have some boats, which I don't know if you saw some of those boat videos I did with the guitar. You might want to check those out. People might want to look at those. All this stuff is on my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Don Latarski. And in fact, the river, there's 9 segments of the river CD, and I've done a video on every one except for the last one, which I'll finish within the next couple of weeks. All about water. and particularly Northwest. And I made a box so I can put my camera down in the water, and there's some other crazy stuff there.
And so explain how that intersects with your...
Right, I was going to finish that. The idea is that when I started transcribing this yesterday, I realized there's a lot of stuff that's very, very... the whole point of that song is a flow. That's the big point right there. It's this flow. And everything flows from one thing to another. And sometimes there's no time at all, which I realized, which I didn't even know that was happening until I started to try to write it down, and then I realized there's no time going on in some of this stuff. It comes and goes. So this is the whole point of the river, right? And there's a lot of metaphors and things that have been made over, centuries about how the river has its own sense of time, and it flows and it goes and it carries things and it transforms, yet it supports a wide range of lives of creatures. And anyway, that is it's mesmerizing. It's like watching a fire, a campfire or something. It's always evolving. And that is what that piece is all about. It's not a repetitive piece. It's a through-composed 31-minute piece. But people don't know that because we had to break it up for streaming purposes. You can't put a 31-minute piece, to stream it.
Right.
So I'm going to put it back together, and people will be able to see that on my YouTube channel, because I'm going to put the music and the videos all together as one 31-minute piece. Because I had to make some endings on some of these pieces that actually don't exist on the original piece. In other words, I had to we got to end this song somehow. But yet, with the real one didn't have those endings on it until you get to 31 minutes. Then it does end, maybe.
Is it fair to say that in a live performance you would never play that river suite the same way?
Totally.
Once?
It never would be played the same way. Because
see, that's the magic of music, right there.
There's a lot of sections in there that are based on improv, but not necessarily improv in sort of a jazz way. I mean, yes, you're making up melodic stuff, but it's not like I'm not playing 16 notes and and like, okay, look at this cool thing I'm about to do. Because it doesn't stay true to the feel.
I love it.
Of that piece.
The feel is not about facility. It's not about
It's about melody. It's about emotion and mood. And just, I want people to feel good. It's not, it takes some dark turns and stuff too, but.
Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you about, obviously you've been teaching in academia, you've been on the bandstand, you came from one of the hottest regional bastions of music in Detroit. Did the music find you?
My cousin, he's deceased now, I think he was 2 or 3 years older than me, was a natural musician, and he could pick up any instrument and play it, and it's like, oh, well, maybe I can do that too,
Yeah.
And then it turned out that I had some musical talent, enough I got some lessons right away in the beginning, so I learned to read music when I was 10 years old, which was really, really good in hindsight. Because
you developed a big vocabulary and a big bag of tunes, I bet.
Well, it wasn't so much the tunes, but I had this ability to be more, I was getting some professional training. It wasn't me just learning, power chords and stuff, and learning how to play King's tunes and things. There's nothing wrong with that, but as time went on, I wanted a more sophisticated harmonic vocabulary. And so that's where I ended up going, and that's what I'm still experimenting with now. And I'm hoping that maybe we can talk after whatever my next project comes out, because I've got some unusual ways of making sounds these days that I don't think anyone has ever heard.
You want to let that out of the bag right now, or no?
I can talk about it.
Maybe give an example of
sense,
one.
But
it'll make sense.
Well, okay. There's several different ways I'm making sounds on the instrument now. One of them, in fact, you can hear this on the River CD, is that we put this guitar into the wind, and then I would tune it in certain ways.
Wow.
And this is on track 8. If you listen to track 8, you'll hear unusual sounds. Mike here was driving the vehicle that I was on top of. There's a good video of that too. It's just called something wind guitar.
So on top of the wind, you were actually moving in a certain direction.
About 35 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other thing I've developed over the last year is what I call water guitars. And I have 2 of those now. And it's where you put the guitar, not a normal guitar, but a guitar-like instrument, into a flow of a stream. And it produces some really, really otherworldly sounds. And I'm going to put that on some kind of product. Whether or not the label is interested, they may not be, because it's kind of out there.
The more out, the better. I mean,
that's where I'm coming from too. It's like, why not?
You're talking about actually putting the apparatus in the water?
Yeah, it's in fact, I've got a video up called just water guitar. Type my name in, and then say water guitar after it, and you'll see me. Mike was there helping me out. We did this last summer on the Mackenzie River, which is one of the world's most pristine rivers known to mankind. It's just right out, well, it flows right through Eugene. It's where Eugene gets all of its water. Spent a lot of time on the Mackenzie. It's unbelievable.
So these sounds are, your sonic palette is still, or you're still increasing that every.
Well, I'm just getting started with this particular aspect of it, and I'm going to harness it. I'm going to build some sample libraries too, which means so that I can, this stuff will go inside the computer, so I can trigger it from a keyboard. So that, because right now the way it is, every time I want to, have that sound on say a song, I've got to go out and capture that sound. The other thing that people will hear on this track, which I think is on track 2 or 3, there's several places where you'll hear what sounds like a string quartet. That's me bowing the guitar with a bicycle inner tube.
I love where you're going right now.
And that's on the recording. You can hear it, but again, no one's going to notice. They're just going to think, well, the guy had a string quartet.
He overdubbed some strings.
Or he, sampled this, or he bought a sample library. These are all organic sounds. All of it.
Yeah, and I mean, best case scenario, you could perform them that way, because once they get synthetic,
that's right.
Then it loses some of that authenticity. But could we rap with a little melodic tune?
Yeah. Let me play. Let's play a little blues or something, or some funk or something like that. Something greasy.
Don Latarski, everybody. Joe Pass is smiling.
I love Joe Pass.
Don Latarski, much love, man. We'll do more. Thank you for being part of the program.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. See you later.